While I healed her, the alien warrior warned me don't get too close. Human. Dr. Marcus Chen had spent 3 years studying xenobiology at the Galactic Medical Institute, poring over texts that detailed the anatomy and physiology of 47 different species. He'd graduated top of his class, published 2 papers on cross-species immune responses, and genuinely believed he was prepared for anything the galaxy could throw at him. That confidence lasted exactly 6 hours into his first assignment aboard the GSV Meridian, a Galactic Council medical frigate that serviced the outer sectors. The ship was a marvel of engineering, a floating hospital capable of treating dozens of species simultaneously. The medical bay stretched across 3 decks, equipped with everything from standard humanoid treatment pods to specialized tanks for aquatic species. Marcus had been assigned to the Xenobiology Research Wing, a relatively quiet posting where he was supposed to catalog unusual biological samples and assist with the occasional difficult case. It was meant to be safe, educational, and thoroughly boring. He should have known better. The universe had a sense of humor, and it was rarely kind. The alarm started as a low warble that quickly escalated into a full emergency klaxon. Marcus was in the research lab, examining a fascinating fungal culture from the Deneb system, when the entire ship lurched violently to one side. Equipment crashed to the floor, cultures shattered, and the artificial gravity stuttered for 3 terrifying seconds before compensating. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and the intercom crackled to life with Captain Threll's voice, high-pitched with panic. All hands brace for impact. Unknown vessel on collision course. Medical teams to Cargo Bay 3 immediately. The corridors were chaos, crew members rushing in every direction, some toward their emergency stations, others away from whatever had happened. He could hear the distinct sound of metal tearing, the groan of stressed hull plating, and beneath it all, a sound that made his blood run cold. It was organic, wet, and clearly in pain. Cargo Bay 3 was a disaster. A section of the outer hull had been breached by what looked like an escape pod, though calling it that was generous. It was more like a metal coffin, scorched black from atmospheric entry, still smoking from the impact. The bay's emergency force field had activated, sealing the breach and preventing explosive decompression, but the damage was extensive. Cargo containers had been crushed, equipment destroyed, and in the center of the wreckage lay something that made every other medic in the room take an involuntary step backward. Marcus had seen Korthax before, but only in carefully controlled academic settings, preserved specimens, or holographic displays. Seeing one in person was entirely different. The warrior was massive, easily 8 feet tall, even collapsed on the ground, with an exoskeleton that looked like it had been carved from obsidian. 4 arms, each corded with muscle beneath the chitinous plating, 2 powerful legs bent at angles that suggested multiple fractures. Her chest plate, normally a seamless shield of biological armor, had been cracked open, revealing the silvery flesh beneath. Blood, thick and luminescent, pooled around her in a spreading circle. The Korthax were legendary throughout the galaxy, and not in a good way. Their empire had expanded through ruthless military conquest, steamrolling over any species that stood in their way. They were apex predators, evolved on a death world where everything was either hunter or prey, and they had brought that mentality to the stars. 17 sectors had fallen to their fleets. They took no prisoners, offered no mercy, and their warriors were said to prefer death over the disgrace of defeat. The medical team stood frozen, and Marcus couldn't entirely blame them. Dr. Selix, a Hevarian with multiple eye stalks, was the first to speak. Korthax physiology is incompatible with 90% of our medical supplies. Their biochemistry is silicon-based, not carbon. We don't have the facilities to treat this. Several of his colleagues looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You don't understand, Selix continued, her voice trembling slightly. The Korthax have a strict honor code. A warrior who accepts help for combat injuries is considered contaminated. If we treat her and she survives, her own people will execute her for weakness. If we try to help and fail, they'll consider it an act of war. Either way, we die. Up close, he could see that her exoskeleton wasn't purely black, but held depths of color, purples and deep blues that shifted in the light. 3 of her forearms were clearly broken, bones visible through torn chitin. Her face, if it could be called that, was a complex arrangement of mandibles and compound eyes, alien and yet somehow still capable of expression. Right now, that expression was pain. He reached out carefully, intending to check her vital signs, when one of her arms moved with shocking speed. The hand, tipped with talons that could easily punch through steel, wrapped around his throat. The grip was precise, controlled despite her injuries, applying just enough pressure to cut off his air without crushing his windpipe entirely. Her eyes, which had been dull and fading, suddenly blazed with amber fire. Her voice was a rasp, filtered through a translator implant that turned her clicking mandibles into something approximating human speech. "Don't get too close, human. My kind kills yours for sport." He could feel his pulse hammering against her grip, knew that she could feel it too. "Then I'll work from a distance," he managed to say, his voice strained but steady. "But you're dying, and I'm the only one here who studied Korthak's biochemistry for my doctoral thesis." "Your choice, Commander. Why would you save an enemy?" "I need silicon-based plasma, synthetic if we don't have organic samples. Bone-fusing compound compatible with chitinous structures. And someone get me the xenobiology database. I need to verify the placement of her primary circulatory organs before I do anything else." The senior physician's eye stalk swiveled between Marcus and the dying Korthax, clearly torn between medical ethics and survival instinct. Finally, she gestured sharply to her staff. "You heard him. Move." Korthak's physiology was a nightmare to work with, all redundant systems and biological fail-safes that could kill a medic as easily as save a patient. Their blood was corrosive to most organic materials, requiring specialized containment. Their bones, while incredibly strong, couldn't be set with standard techniques because they grew differently than carbon-based skeletal structures. And through it all, the commander watched him with those burning amber eyes, tracking his every movement with an intensity that made his hands want to shake. He synthesized a compatible blood plasma using a combination of silicon compounds and rare minerals, filtering it 3 times to ensure purity. He carefully realigned her broken limbs, using a bone-fusing compound he'd theorized about in his thesis, but never actually tested. He sealed the crack in her chest plate with a bioplastic polymer that would hold until her natural healing processes could take over. It was improvisation on a knife's edge, every decision potentially fatal. The commander spoke only once more during the treatment. "You studied us, our biology. Why?" "We slaughtered 3,000 humans on Epsilon 7. I was there. I led the assault on the agricultural domes. Scientists and farmers trying to establish a colony in neutral space. They'd been unarmed, defenseless." "I know," he said quietly, resuming his work. "I read your service record. Commander Velnara, 3rd Tactical Division, 47 confirmed battle victories. That's not the same thing as knowing what you are. All hands, this is the captain. 5 Korthax warships have just emerged from hyperspace at close range. They're powering weapons and broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding we return Commander Velnara immediately, or they'll reduce this ship to atoms. We have approximately 10 minutes to comply." Marcus looked down at his patient, at the warrior who'd killed thousands of his people, who was now lying broken and vulnerable on his table. Her eyes met his, and he saw something he hadn't expected to see in a Korthax. Fear, not of death, but of something worse. "They're not here to rescue me," she whispered. "Hunt protocol. A wounded commander is considered compromised, a weakness in the chain. They'll board this ship and execute me themselves. It's the only way to preserve unit honor." The idea that her own people would kill her for the crime of being injured, of accepting help, struck him as fundamentally wrong on a level that transcended species or politics. He looked at Dr. Selix, at the other medical staff who were already edging toward the exits. He looked at the monitoring equipment showing Velnara's vital signs, still critical but stabilizing. Then he looked back at the commander, at this warrior who'd committed atrocities but who was still a living being in his care. "Not on my watch," he said quietly. He turned to his colleagues with a determination that surprised even himself. "Nobody moves her. She's not stable enough for transport, and I'm not letting anyone kill my patient. I don't care if it's her own fleet or the entire Korthax Empire. Marcus, they'll destroy the entire ship. Everyone aboard will die. Because I took an oath, and I didn't include any exceptions for inconvenient politics or scary aliens. Now either help me or get out. The bridge of the GSV Meridian was in absolute chaos. Captain Threll, a Civian with pale blue skin and gill slits that flared with every panicked breath, stared at the tactical display like it was a death sentence. In many ways, it was. 5 Korthax warships hung in space around them, each one bristling with enough firepower to vaporize the medical frigate 3 times over. Their dark hulls absorbed light, making them look like holes punched in the fabric of space itself, and their weapons were already charging with an ominous red glow. The communications officer, a young Tyrellian named Kix, looked up from her station with her face pale. "Captain, they're broadcasting again. Same message. Return the commander or face total destruction. They've given us 8 minutes to comply." He'd been a bureaucrat before taking this posting, a paper pusher who'd accepted the captaincy because medical frigates were supposed to be safe. They traveled established routes, treated sick colonists, responded to natural disasters. They didn't get caught between Korthax battle fleets and injured enemy commanders. This wasn't supposed to happen. "Where's Dr. Chen now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Still in Medical Bay 3 with the Korthax," Kix replied. "He's refusing to move her. Says she's too unstable for transport. We're giving them what they want." Most of the medical staff had retreated to other sections of the ship, leaving only Marcus and a single nursing assistant, a brave or foolish Havarian named Kless, who was monitoring the various machines keeping Velnara alive. The commander herself was unconscious now, her breathing more regular but still labored, her massive form completely filling the oversized medical table. Marcus looked up as they entered, and Threll saw something in the young doctor's eyes that made him uncomfortable. It wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was absolute conviction, the kind of determination that got people killed in stupid, pointless ways. "Dr. Chen," Threll began, trying to sound authoritative despite his shaking voice. "I understand your commitment to your patient, but we have a situation. The Korthax fleet will destroy this ship in less than 8 minutes if we don't comply with their demands. We need to transfer the commander to a medical pod and prepare her for transport. This is a direct order from your commanding officer. The plasma infusion needs another 6 hours minimum, and her bone grafts won't hold if we jostle her. Transport means death. Can you really justify their lives for one patient? For accepting help, if we hand her over, we're accomplices to murder. Sir, we can stun the human and move the Korthax ourselves. You do that, and I guarantee she dies before you get her to the airlock. Her physiology is too complex. One wrong move, one incorrect handling procedure, and her secondary cardiovascular system will collapse. Is that what you want to tell the Korthax? That we killed her while trying to hand her over?" When she spoke, her voice was weak but clear. "The human is correct. Move me and I die." She paused, a wet clicking sound coming from her mandibles. "Though perhaps that would be preferable. You don't understand what's happening here, Captain. This isn't a rescue mission. The Korthax don't rescue. They eradicate weakness. When a commander is compromised in the field, whether by injury, capture, or perceived weakness, they become a liability. Hunt protocol is activated. The nearest battle group is dispatched not to retrieve the commander but to eliminate them. It preserves unit integrity, prevents intelligence leaks, and most importantly, it maintains the image of Korthax invincibility. A wounded commander is worse than a dead one. A wounded commander suggests that we can be hurt, that we can fail. The only question is who kills me, and how many of you die with me. Then what do you suggest? We can't fight them. This is a medical vessel, barely armed. You might survive. My people are coming, and they will not be deterred by moral arguments or medical ethics. Save your crew. That's the logical choice." He turned to Threll, and the captain saw a fierce intelligence burning in the young doctor's eyes. "Give me 18 hours. That's all I need to get her stable enough for the stress of whatever comes next." "We have 6 minutes. You're a captain, so act like one." He looked at Velnara, at this warrior who'd killed thousands but who was now completely vulnerable. He looked at Marcus, a human who was risking everything for a principle, and he made a choice that would probably get them all killed. "Fine, 18 hours. But if I can't hold them off, we jettison her and run." "Agreed." War Sovereign Krelax, commander of the 3rd Battle Group, regarded him with the kind of casual disdain a human might show an insect. "You have 2 minutes remaining," Krelax stated. "Produce Commander Velnara or die. We need time to extract her safely without causing further injury. Surely you don't want damaged goods." "Her status is irrelevant." "Is that it? Are you worried about what she might tell us?" "You have 12 hours to extract Commander Velnara from your wreckage and prepare her for transport. At the end of that time, you will jettison her in a sealed pod. We will retrieve the pod and execute her according to our laws. If you attempt to flee, we will destroy your ship. If you attempt to interfere, we will destroy your ship. If you do anything other than exactly what I've specified, we will destroy your ship. Am I understood?" The communication cut off and Threll sagged in his chair, feeling like he'd just run a marathon. 12 hours. He'd bought them 12 hours, not the 18 Marcus wanted, but it was something. He opened an internal channel to the medical bay. "Dr. Chen, you have 12 hours. Make them count." "You should have let me go," she said quietly. "Probably," Marcus agreed, not looking up from the bone scan he was performing. "But I have this character flaw where I actually care about keeping people alive. Call it a professional weakness. Or maybe it'll save us both." He paused, studying the scan results with a frown. "Your bone structure is fascinating. The fractures are already beginning to knit themselves together, but the process is chaotic. If I could just stabilize the growth pattern, accelerate it somehow. They can differentiate into almost any tissue type under the right conditions. In theory, if I could modify them to be compatible with silicon-based biology, they might act as a catalyst for your healing processes. Speed up your recovery exponentially. It's insane, experimental, and completely unauthorized. At least this way, I die in the pursuit of knowledge rather than at the end of a firing squad." He extracted stem cells from his own bone marrow, a painful process that left him dizzy. Then began the delicate work of modifying their structure to be compatible with Korthak's biology. It took hours of precise genetic manipulation, using techniques that were theoretical at best and completely insane at worst. Kless assisted him, her small hands steady as she monitored Velnara's vital signs and managed the complex web of machines keeping the commander alive. At one point, she spoke quietly. "Dr. Chen, can I ask you something?" "There's something else. My father sent me one last message before the dome was breached. He said he forgave them, the Korthaks, said that hate was too heavy a burden to carry into death. So you see," Marcus continued, his hands never stopping their work, "saving her isn't about absolution or forgiveness. It's about proving that my father was right, that we can be better than our worst moments. That hate doesn't have to define us." Her cellular regeneration rate was increasing, doubling, tripling. The fractures in her bones were healing at a visible rate. The crack in her chest plate began to seal itself with new growth. But something else was happening too. The new tissue growing wasn't purely Korthaks. It had markers, structures that shouldn't exist. Human DNA was integrating with Korthak's cellular material, creating something unprecedented. Velnara gasped, her body convulsing once before settling into a new rhythm. Her exoskeleton began to shift colors, showing patterns that no Korthaks had ever displayed. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Marcus checked the scans, his eyes wide with amazement and fear. "You're becoming something new. The human cells aren't just catalyzing your healing, they're merging with your biology, creating a hybrid cellular structure. I don't know what the long-term effects will be, but right now, you're healing faster than I thought possible. Truly contaminated now. Not just weak, but polluted with alien biology." Threll's voice came over the intercom, tense with barely controlled panic. "All hands, the Korthaks are launching boarding craft. They're not waiting the full 12 hours. Dr. Chen, they're coming for her now. You have maybe 10 minutes. She was weak, trembling with the effort, but she managed to get to her feet. "I can stand. Whether I can fight is another question. Because I'm not letting them take you without a fight. What exactly do you think you're going to do against Korthak's warriors?" "I'm good at that." The boarding craft hit the Meridian's hull with a metallic clang that reverberated through every deck. Marcus heard it clearly even from the medical bay, a sound like a predator's jaws clamping down on prey. The ship's internal sensors showed 5 breach points. each one disgorging a squad of Korthax warriors in full combat armor. They moved through the corridors with terrifying efficiency, and the few security personnel brave enough to stand in their way were swept aside like leaves in a hurricane. Captain Threll had ordered a general evacuation to the aft sections of the ship, pulling everyone back to create a buffer zone. It was a futile gesture, but it gave the crew something to do other than panic. The Korthax weren't interested in the crew anyway. They had one objective, and one objective only. Marcus stood in front of the medical bay entrance, the surgical laser in his hand, feeling absurdly inadequate. Beside him, Kless had armed herself with a plasma cutter, though her hands shook so badly he worried she might hurt herself. Behind them, Velnara leaned against the medical table, her breathing steadier now but her body still weak from the trauma and the radical treatment. The hybrid cells were working miracles, but miracles took time, and time was the one thing they didn't have. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, accompanied by the distinctive clicking of Korthax mandibles communicating in their native language. Marcus's translator implant picked up fragments of the conversation. Target located. Minimal resistance encountered. Prepare for extraction and termination. The medical bay doors slid open, and War Sovereign Krelax entered with 4 members of his honor guard. They were enormous, each one nearly as tall as Velnara, their armor covered in battle scars and trophy marks. Krelax himself was distinguished by a deep gouge across his chest plate, a wound that would have killed most beings but which he wore like a badge of pride. His amber eyes swept the room, dismissing Marcus and Kless as irrelevant before focusing on Velnara. "Commander Velnara," he said, his voice a rumble like distant thunder, "you have brought shame upon the 3rd Division. By accepting aid from these aliens, by allowing yourself to be saved rather than dying with honor, you have violated every principle our people hold sacred. Hunt protocol has been invoked. Prepare yourself for execution." "I violated nothing," she said clearly. "I was injured in combat, crashed on a neutral vessel, and received medical treatment from a skilled physician. There is no dishonor in survival, Krelax. Only in the weak-minded thinking that makes you fear it. And when we cannot dominate, we die. That is the way. It suggests weakness in our systems, flaws in our doctrine. You'd rather kill me than admit that maybe, just maybe, we have something to learn from others. Enough words, she dies now. She's my patient, and I'm not letting you kill her." Krelax looked at him with an expression that suggested he wasn't sure whether to be amused or insulted. "Human," Krelax said slowly, "do you have any concept of what you're doing? That weapon couldn't scratch our armor. You couldn't harm a single one of us if we gave you an hour and showed you our weak points. You are standing between Korthax warriors and our objective with nothing but misplaced courage. Step aside or die. She's my patient, and I will not let you execute her. So if you want her, you're going to have to go through me first." It took Marcus a moment to realize he was laughing. "You have courage, human, I'll grant you that. Foolish, suicidal courage, but courage nonetheless. Unfortunately, courage without strength is just elaborate suicide." He gestured to his guards. "Remove him. Try not to damage him too badly. He amuses me." The medical bay filled with tension so thick Marcus could taste it. "You want to execute me, Krelax?" Velnara's voice was steady, hard as diamond. "Fine, but you'll do it according to our laws, not by murdering me while I'm defenseless. I invoke Talshara. Trial by single combat. You want to kill me for dishonor. Then face me yourself and prove I'm unworthy to live." Talshara was ancient, a ritual combat invoked only in the most extreme circumstances. It was a challenge that couldn't be refused without bringing dishonor on the challenger. "You can barely stand," Krelax observed. "Talshara would be a formality. A waste of time. Unless the mighty War Sovereign is worried that even wounded, even contaminated, I might still be dangerous enough to make you work for your victory." Refusing a Talshara challenge would raise questions, suggest weakness or fear. But accepting meant fighting a wounded opponent, which was also problematic from a cultural standpoint. The War Sovereign was trapped between 2 unpalatable options, and Velnara had put him there deliberately. Before Krelax could respond, Marcus spoke up again. His voice was calmer now, his mind racing through possibilities. "She's not fighting anyone. Not in her current condition. It would be murder, not combat. And I have questions. For instance, War Sovereign, do you know what I did to save Commander Velnara's life? Your physiology is silicon-based. Mine is carbon-based, normally incompatible, as I'm sure you know. But I used modified human stem cells to catalyze her healing. Those cells didn't just speed up her recovery. They integrated with her biology. Right now, human DNA is flowing through her circulatory system, merging with her cells, becoming part of her on a fundamental level. You contaminated her, truly contaminated her. She's unique. This changes nothing except to make her execution more urgent. War Sovereign, permission to speak. Our medics couldn't save him. They said his damage was too extensive, that our healing capacity has limits. He paused. If this human technique could have saved him, how many other warriors have we lost unnecessarily? How many victories have we sacrificed because we're too proud to admit we have biological limitations? Thexel had touched on something dangerous, a crack in the foundation of Korthak's philosophy. We are strong, Krelak said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. We do not need alien assistance. When was the last time we actually learned something, Krelax? When did we innovate, create, adapt? The hybrid cells were working faster than he'd predicted, her body responding to the stress with accelerated healing. Look at me, she continued, spreading her arms. I carry human DNA now. By your standards, I'm contaminated, polluted, unfit to serve. But I'm also healing faster than any Korthax in recorded history. I'm adapting. That's what this human showed me. Adaptation isn't weakness, it's survival. And survival isn't the opposite of strength, it's the prerequisite for it. Human, you saved her knowing what she'd done, knowing her history. Why? She probably gave orders that led directly to my parents' deaths. I could have let her die and called it justice. But that wouldn't have brought them back. It wouldn't have made anything better. It would have just added one more death to the pile. The honor guard waited, tense, hands near weapons, but not yet committed to violence. The whole tableau felt balanced on a knife's edge, ready to tip into bloodshed at the slightest provocation. When Krelax finally spoke, his voice was different, thoughtful. You speak of strength I don't understand, human, strength that looks like surrender, survival that looks like compromise. He turned to his warriors. Our empire has existed for 10,000 cycles. We have conquered everything we've encountered. We are feared across 50 sectors. He paused, and when he continued, there was something like pain in his voice. And we have learned nothing, created nothing, built nothing that will outlast us. We are predators, yes. But what predator ever built a civilization? But contamination can mean different things. Perhaps she is not weakened but changed. Perhaps this human procedure has created something valuable, something worth studying rather than destroying. Thexel looked at Marcus. The human claims his technique could save warriors who would otherwise die. If this is true, it has strategic value, military value. I suggest we test it before we destroy it, Thexel countered. The human speaks of adaptation. Very well, let Velnara be the test. She claims this contamination makes her stronger, faster healing. Let her prove it. If she fails, execute her as planned. If she succeeds, perhaps our doctrine needs examination. Very well, Krelax said finally. But there will be conditions. Commander Velnara, you will be reassigned, no longer to combat operations but to a new division. You will be the first of what we shall call the Talshorai, the adapted ones. You will study these alien techniques, test these hybrid capabilities, and report directly to the War Council. If you prove valuable, others may follow. If you prove worthless, or if this contamination weakens you, you will be terminated with extreme prejudice. You will have safe passage through Korthak's space. You will not be harmed, not be hunted, not be interfered with. Consider it payment for an interesting afternoon and a challenge to assumptions I thought were unassailable. I accept. Krelax and his warriors left without further ceremony, their heavy footsteps fading down the corridor. The moment they were gone, Marcus sagged against the medical table, his hands finally starting to shake with the delayed shock of what had just happened. Kless let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for the past 10 minutes. Velnara looked at Marcus, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that wasn't calculation or pain or warrior's pride. It might have been gratitude. It might have been respect. It might have been the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet. You did it, she said softly. You saved me twice, once from my injuries and once from my own people. That bought us time to make them think. We fix things. It was a simple space, just a curved wall of transparent aluminum looking out into the void, with a few benches bolted to the floor for anyone who wanted to sit and contemplate the infinite. He'd spent countless hours here during his first weeks aboard, staring at distant stars and trying to wrap his mind around the sheer scale of the galaxy he now called home. Tonight, he wasn't alone. Velnara stood beside him, her massive form reflected in the transparent wall, her amber eyes tracking the distant shapes of her people's warships as they prepared to depart. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the medical bay, 3 days of tense negotiations and careful medical monitoring. The hybrid cells had continued their work, transforming Velnara's biology in ways that fascinated and terrified the xenobiology team in equal measure. She was stronger now than she'd been before the crash. The scans showed bone density increased by 40%, muscle fiber efficiency improved, even her exoskeleton had developed new properties. The human DNA hadn't weakened her. It had enhanced her, created something that was more than the sum of its parts. The discovery had sent shockwaves through both human and Korthax medical communities. "They're leaving," Velnara said quietly, watching as the warships began to maneuver away from the Meridian. "Krelax is returning to the core worlds to present his findings to the War Council." Thexel volunteered to accompany him, to speak on behalf of the Talshorai Initiative. Creating an entire division of adapted warriors seems like a big leap from grudgingly letting one commander live. But Thexel is respected and Krelax is ambitious. If they can frame this as a strategic advantage rather than a philosophical shift, there's a chance. She paused. "Besides, I'm living proof now. My healing rate is unprecedented. My strength metrics exceed my previous baselines. Hard to argue with measurable results." "Yes, well, perhaps inferior isn't quite the right word anymore." Velnara turned to look at him directly, and Marcus was struck again by how expressive her alien features had become to him. 3 days ago, he could barely tell her emotional states apart. Now he could read subtle shifts in her mandible positions, the intensity variations in her eye glow, the small postural changes that indicated mood. "You know what bothers me most about all of this? One human with a scalpel and some stem cells, and suddenly 10,000 cycles of Korthax doctrine seems fragile, incomplete, like we built an entire civilization on foundations we never bothered to examine. Every civilization does that to some extent. We build on assumptions, create systems based on what worked in the past, and then we defend those systems because questioning them feels dangerous. But that's also how civilizations stagnate and eventually collapse. The ones that survive are the ones that can adapt. Yet for my people, it might as well be heresy. The Civian had actually developed something like a spine during the crisis, standing up to both Korthax warriors and nervous council bureaucrats with surprising firmness. Marcus suspected the experience had changed Threll almost as much as it had changed Velnara. "Doctor." "Chen, Commander Velnara," Threll greeted them with a nod. "I thought you'd want to know. The Galactic Council has officially classified this incident as a successful first contact diplomatic resolution. They're calling it the Meridian Accord. Apparently, getting the Korthax to agree to anything other than conquest is newsworthy enough to name. Makes it sound more organized than it actually was. The official record will say that through skilled diplomacy and medical innovation, we achieved a breakthrough in Korthax relations. The fact that it mostly involved you being stubborn, and Velnara being willing to challenge her entire culture will probably get footnoted. The less attention this gets in certain circles, the better. There are factions within the Korthax Empire who would see this as betrayal, not innovation. They would happily start a civil war over it. When had she become something more than a patient? "Safe is a relative term," Velnara replied. "But I won't be alone. Krelax has assigned me to remain here on the Meridian as an official liaison, the first Korthax to serve on a multi-species vessel in a non-combat capacity. It's meant to be a test case, but it also gives me protection. An official assignment sanctioned by the War Council. Harder to assassinate someone who's serving the Empire, even if they don't like how I'm serving it." They would have more time to understand this strange new dynamic between them, this connection forged in crisis and maintained through mutual respect. Threll cleared his throat delicately. Yes, about that, Doctor. Chen, you've also been assigned to remain on the Meridian as the head of a new xenobiological research initiative. Apparently, the Council is very interested in your hybrid cell technique. They want you to continue your research, with Velnara as your primary test subject. Full funding, complete autonomy, access to resources you probably couldn't even dream of before. What happens after that understanding is achieved, well, that will depend on a lot of factors. But you'll have oversight authority. Nothing gets implemented without your approval. What do you think? But hiding it, pretending it doesn't exist, that doesn't prevent the ugly. It just prevents the good. There's a difference. The medical frigate, once a backwater posting for bureaucrats and cautious scientists, transformed into a nexus of cutting-edge research and cautious cultural exchange. Marcus's lab expanded to fill an entire deck, equipped with the finest equipment 3 different species could provide. Velnara became not just his test subject, but his research partner, her intimate knowledge of Korthak's physiology proving invaluable as they mapped the full extent of the hybrid cellular integration. But more than that, they became friends. It started small, professional conversations about medical procedures, expanding into discussions about culture, philosophy, the nature of strength and weakness. Velnara spoke of growing up in a Korthak's clutch, where competition started from birth and only the strongest survived to adulthood. She described a childhood where every interaction was a test, every relationship provisional, every moment of vulnerability potentially fatal. Marcus shared his own history, growing up on Earth in a family of scientists, losing his parents to the very species he was now working to understand. He talked about the anger he'd carried, the way it had driven him to study Korthak's biology not out of curiosity, but out of a need to understand the enemy, and how that understanding had gradually eroded the hate, replaced it with something more complex. You know what the irony is? Marcus said one evening as they worked late in the lab, analyzing the latest batch of cellular samples. I came out here to learn about aliens, to understand the species that killed my parents. I thought understanding would give me closure, help me move past the anger. Instead, it just showed me how much we're all the same. Different biology, different culture, but underneath, we're all just trying to survive, trying to matter, trying to leave something behind that says we were here. What you've accomplished here goes beyond revenge or even justice. You've created the possibility of change. That's rare. You're not helping us become better warriors, Velnara said, setting down the pipette and turning to face him fully. You're helping us become more than warriors. That's the gift you don't even realize you're giving. Every Korthax who goes through the Talshurai program, every warrior who learns that adaptation isn't weakness, every commander who realizes that there are kinds of strength beyond combat, that's your legacy. You're not making us stronger. You're making us whole. Someone caught between 2 worlds, 2 philosophies, forging something new from the collision. I warned you not to get too close, Velnara said softly, her voice carrying a note Marcus had never heard before. Do you remember? In the medical bay, when you first tried to help me, I told you my kind kills yours for sport. I thought the risk was physical violence. I didn't realize the real danger was this. Connection, understanding, the possibility that an enemy could become something else entirely. Velnara's mandibles moved in a complex pattern he was still learning to read. I don't have words for it. In Korthak's culture, we have clanmates, battle brothers, clutch family, all relationships defined by hierarchy and utility, but you're none of those things. You're something new, something we don't have language for yet. Just because. It was Threll, and his voice carried an urgency that immediately put them both on alert. Dr. Chen, Commander Velnara, you need to come to the bridge immediately. We're receiving transmissions from Korthak's space. Multiple transmissions. It started. The screen showed a split view of multiple Korthak's commanders, each one broadcasting from a different warship, each one making the same announcement. They were volunteering for the Talshurai program. Dozens of them, from across multiple battle groups, requesting assignment to the adapted division. Some cited Velnara's improved metrics as justification. Others spoke more openly about doubts they'd harbored for years. questions about whether constant conquest was really the ultimate expression of strength. A few, like Thexel, spoke passionately about lost comrades who might have been saved with access to hybrid medical techniques. But there was resistance, too. Other transmissions showed commanders denouncing the Tal'Sharai as traitors, contaminated weaklings who'd betrayed everything the Korthax stood for. One particularly vitriolic broadcast called for Velnara's immediate execution and the purging of anyone associated with the adapted program. The Korthax Empire, it seemed, was fracturing along ideological lines, and the Meridian sat at the exact center of the fault line. "This is going to get ugly," Threll said quietly. "Civil war probably, maybe worse." She was watching her entire civilization tear itself apart over a decision she'd made in a moment of desperation. The burden of that would be immense. Marcus placed a hand on her arm, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. She looked down at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes, carefully hidden but present. Fear not for herself, but for what she'd set in motion. "We'll figure it out," he said with more confidence than he felt. "Together, that's what friends do, right? Face impossible situations and somehow muddle through. I think you're learning that skill pretty well yourself. It would be messy, painful, and probably bloody, but it would also be necessary, because Velnara was right. The Korthax had spent 10,000 cycles conquering without growing, destroying without building. They'd become so focused on being the strongest that they'd forgotten to ask what strength was actually for. And now, thanks to one crashed escape pod and one stubborn human doctor, they were being forced to confront that question. The future was uncertain. War was likely. Bloodshed was almost guaranteed. But there was also hope, the possibility that two species who'd been enemies could find a way to be something else. Something better. Marcus looked at Velnara, at this warrior who'd become his friend, his research partner, his bridge to an entire civilization. She met his gaze, and for a moment, despite all the chaos swirling around them, despite the uncertainty of what came next, they both smiled. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I woke up that morning 3 weeks ago, I was planning to spend the day cataloging fungal samples. Would have been a quiet, boring, completely safe day." Marcus thought about his parents, about Epsilon 7, about 3,000 humans who died screaming. He thought about hate and anger and the weight of carrying grudges. Then he thought about the Korthax commanders volunteering to change, about warriors learning to heal instead of just destroy, about an entire civilization being dragged kicking and screaming toward something better. "Not even one," he said honestly. "Though I'm keeping that surgical laser nearby, just in case you decide to warn me about getting too close again. Whatever comes next, we face it together." They'd started as enemies, doctor and patient brought together by chance and necessity. They'd become something more, something neither species had words for yet. And in becoming that, they'd created the possibility that entire civilizations could do the same. It wasn't peace. It wasn't even really friendship yet, not on a species-wide scale, but it was a start, a foundation, a single point of light in a galaxy that had grown too comfortable with darkness. And sometimes, Marcus thought as he watched Velnara coordinate responses to the incoming transmissions with the efficiency of a natural leader, sometimes one light was all you needed to start a fire that could illuminate the stars. The Meridian Accord wasn't the end of anything. It was barely even a beginning, but it was something, and something was infinitely better than nothing. The rest would come with time, effort, and probably more near-death experiences than Marcus was entirely comfortable contemplating. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight he had work to do, a friend to support, and a galaxy to help reshape. One hybrid cell at a time. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5 Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.